An Introduction to Sculpture. The ancient Greeks defined sculpture as carving and modeling, but today sculpture refers to any way of creating three-dimensional forms from any available materials. Since modernism, there have been almost a complete freedom of materials and process. And sculpture is part of the visual arts that operates in three dimensions. So when we're talking about form, we're talking about something that has height, width, and depth. It involves physical manipulation of different medias. Materials used in sculpture are very diverse and they have changed throughout history. The classical era's materials were with outstanding durability. They were metals, especially bronze, stone, clay. Other things that were used during the classical era would definitely be wood, but that is, it's not as durable and it seems to compress and decay quicker than others. The modern era, with the use of modern technologies, opened the door for so many other uses of materials, such as plastics or welding, motorization, and even found objects. So with modern eras, you can actually have deliberately short-lived mediums too. Some artists work with gas or ice and even blood. So here's some images from the classical era, and these are sculptures created during those times using things like marble, bronze, ivory, and even plasters. The modern era opens up many more opportunities to use different materials. So we have things that are made from found objects, metals that are welded together. The sculpture on the right-hand side, that is made from blood, and it's actually kept inside of um, a frozen or a deep freeze type refrigerated cavity. Unfortunately, if the electricity goes out or that a motor stops working, then that blood will melt and the whole sculpture would decay. And then you have things that are made from plastics and other materials, other classical materials like bronze and things like that you can still use. So when we talk about sculpture, we have to define what type it is. And in the round is meant to be seen from all sides. It's something that's three-dimensional. It can sometimes be called freestanding. And it's a type of sculpture and where the figures are represented in three dimensions. They are forms. So they are meant, again, to be seen from all angles. And these sculptures are not attached to a flat background, to the back. So like statues or a bust or sculptural groups, these are the types of sculptures that are found in the round. They can be viewed from either one definite standpoint, one vantage point, or several vantage points. So it gives their viewers several complementary perspectives that they can take when looking at this art piece. Here are some images. You can physically walk around this entire image to see it in its entirety. Now these images are chosen from one particular perspective, but again, you can move around that sculpture and see it from any angle that you choose. Another type of sculpture is known as a relief sculpture, and this is a technique where the sculpted element remains attached to a solid background. So the term comes from a Latin verb, relevo, which means to raise. So you're raising that sculpture off of that background. And there's different degrees of relief depending on the amount that is coming off of the sculpted form or that background. There are three basic types of relief sculpture. You have a low relief, or sometimes referred to as a bas relief, and that's a French term, and it simply means shallow. So it's not projecting off of the background, just slightly. Think of something that we carry around every day that might be a low relief. I have several in my purse. in my wallet. Coins. These are a great example of a low relief. If you take a coin out and look at it, you'll see that the image, the image that's on the coin is slightly raised off the background. Very slight. Then you have high relief, alto relief, and alto relief is a Italian term. So sometimes you'll see that it's referring to the same type thing. And that's where more than half of the sculpted surface is protruding off of that background, is lifted off of the background. So let's see. Mount Rushmore is a prime example of a high relief. The presidents are lifted off of the mountainside. They're still attached, that's their background, but they are lifted, and it's more than half of the sculpture is lifted off of that background. The third is the less, known, less used relief. It's called a sunken relief, and it's where you are actually digging into the background, so it's below the level, the surrounding surface level. Now, it's found almost exclusively in ancient Egyptian art, although it has been used in some very beautiful small-scale ivory reliefs from India. But primarily, it's a type of relief that's only found in ancient Egyptian art. So knowing the distinction between low and high relief is the most important, as they are the two that are generally the only terms used when discussing relief sculptures. And here's some examples of reliefs. So you can see that there is a flat background to them. So if we were to walk around this, if we could, walk around this to the other side, we wouldn't see anything at all. The one at the bottom right is an ancient Egyptian sculpture, and that is showing a sunken relief. The rest of these are primarily, low reliefs, a little bit of a high relief in some of them. So let's talk about the process used to create these sculptures. And there's several different processes you could use. And so one of them is carving, and this is a subtractive process of a hard material that is being removed from its original form. So think of something that you would carve away, stones, rock, or even bone. You're taking away, you're scraping away things from that original surface. Modeling is the opposite of this. This is an additive process. So you're adding something to it. Things like clay or wax or paper mache, methods that produce from a pliable, a flexible material that you are building up to create a form. So carving, subtractive, modeling is additive. And then there's other subcategories that go underneath that modeling, like ceramics. So that's just the process of working with clay to create rock hard forms. You're working with something that's malleable, that's pliable, that's soft, and that you're creating it into something that will transition into a hard form. Or paper mache, which is a French term just meaning that the paper is being reduced to a pulp. So it's the process of adding paper that's soaked in a paste, and after a while it will harden, and it's placed over a form, and it creates that shape. So here we have some images of carving and modeling. Then we have casting. And casting is a process in which a liquid material is usually poured into a mold of a desired shape, and then it's allowed to cool down and solidify. The solidified part is known as the casting, so that's that liquid that we're pouring in there. And it can be broken out or really removed from that mold. You really don't want to break the mold unless it's just a one-time thing. But anyway, it completes that process. And casting has been around for at least 7,000 years. It's a very, very old process that has survived for a long time. And in fact, During the Middle Ages, the actual process was lost. A lot of things got lost during the Middle Ages. It was the doldrums, the Dark Ages, and casting was one of those. The oldest casting is of a copper frog from 3200 BCE. Now, today, we use casting not just for art, but many of our machines that are created use casting. We're using computers, we're using this old process with modern technologies, and we use casting quite often. Now, this is a funny term, lost wax casting. You tend to think, well, it's lost. This is that casting that was lost. No, what it means is it's sometimes referred to as investment casting. But it's the same kind of process, except you are using wax involved. And what happens is the wax is melted, so it's lost. And that's where we get that term. But, it's a metal sculpture that's first, created from clay, then wax is added to that process. It's very tedious and takes some time, and then once that is reheated, the wax is lost, it drips away, and then we have a mold, and then the metal is added to it. So it's a duplication. You're taking something original and you're duplicating it over and over and over again. So here are some images. Casting, usually you're working with metal, so it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a metal. Now, lost casting, yes, it is a metal. But you can cast things in plaster. Have you ever seen a plaster mold where people put their hands in it? Or even today, silicone or other plastics you can create with casting. Things that are liquid form that later on harden and create molds. That's casting. In the 20th century, we had a new way of making sculpture that emerged, and that would be constructions. So constructions are sculptures that are built with the aid or the use of modern industrial technologies. If you can think of one such as welding or a sewing machine to do stitching or weaving or anything that's kind of motorized, these are things that are considered construction sculptures. Underneath that category, we have things called assemblage, and this is a particular type of sculpture where it is constructed from a variety of ready-made parts, materials that were not originally meant to be used in artworks. So essentially, it's like a collage, but you're using forms. You're using something that's a three-dimensional object. And then you also have kinetic art. So the word kinetic simply means mobile or moving. So it's a sculpture that is mobile, that has movement to it. And here's a few examples of some construction materials. The one on the left, as it actually moves around, those pieces are constantly moving. The two on the right are more just constructive sculptures. At the bottom, you have a sculpture that's by Pablo Picasso, and then above you just have some found objects, kind of an assemblage. And that is the introduction to sculptures.